Hey, everybody, Joe Joseph here, and this is the DailySheeple.com's Daily News Brief. So, I can't help myself. Here I was today saying to myself, I am not going to tackle anything that has to do with this fake news narrative. I mean, seriously, I was honestly not going to even touch it with a 10-foot pole because, as far as I'm concerned, I think I basically said what needed to be said, at least from my standpoint. And then The Hill came around, thehill.com, and they posted an article today that Clinton blasts the epidemic of fake news. Yes, that's right. According to The Hill, Hillary Clinton said that basically the spread of fake news online is, in her words, epidemic. And so my thing is, what is epidemic? When we talk about epidemic, we should really define what epidemic is, because I'll tell you what, I guess the spread of fake news online, or better yet, over the airwaves, or better yet, in the newspapers, I guess would certainly be epidemic. See, the problem is no one yet has defined what fake news is, outside of just saying fake news. That's it. Just, hey, fake news. And then you got a fly-by-night organization that remains completely and totally anonymous that comes out and lists 200 websites, something that I could have done in my sleep if I wanted to, and just kind of eeny, meeny, miny, moe, and pick 200 websites to say that, yeah, well, you know, based on our educated opinion, although you don't know who we are or what our credentials are or anything else, but trust us that these websites, they spread fake news. Blech. And it's just unbelievable. She says this, quote, the epidemic of malicious fake news and false propaganda. Wait a minute. False propaganda? Is there such a thing as true propaganda, or is it just, I don't know. So that's kind of weird. But she says, the epidemic of malicious fake news and false propaganda that flooded social media over the past year. Remember, the other day I defined what social media was. That's right. And if you start doing things with social media, you start really infringing on that First Amendment, because it doesn't have to do with news. Social media deals with the spread of ideas, with networking, with people blogging, but it has nothing to do, by definition, with a news organization. So that's crap. She says it's now clear the so-called fake news can have real-world consequences. Again, not defining what fake news is. And the reason why is because if they do, then they're exposed for what they are. Why, fake news is anything that doesn't down the party line or doesn't do what the government is in the government's best interest. Oh, really? Oh, okay. Some Democrats, The Hill writes, have argued the spread of anti-Clinton fake news online contributed to her electoral loss to Donald Trump. The spread of anti-Clinton fake news. Just let me say that one more time for anti-Clinton fake news. It's just bizarre. We live in a bizarro world. It says the issue has received renewed attention this week after a gunman entered a pizzeria. There it is. There's the gunman, the actor with an IMDb page. It's the gunman entered a pizzeria in Washington that was at the center of a false, even though there's a lot of weird things that go on in the ping pong pizzeria. False viral conspiracy theory that alleged it was home to a pedophilia ring operated by Clinton and her inner circle. No, because pedophilia rings don't happen at all in Washington, D.C. or in London or over in Europe. No, the Franklin cover-up never happened. You know? Took a state senator to write a book about it to give it any credibility. But it never happened. Goes on to say, quote, this isn't about politics or partisanship. That's what Clinton said. This was during a speech at a ceremony honoring retiring Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid. Oh, that had to be a real hoot. What a party. Says this, lives are at risk. Lives of ordinary people just trying to go about their day to do their jobs and contribute to their communities. Yeah, because they got an actor to go into the Ping Pong Comet Pizzeria place and fire an assault rifle, which is a semi-automatic rifle. It's not an assault rifle. You know, if we define things. And shot around into the floor. Yeah. Because I'm here to self-investigate, by God. Because anybody that's going to go and self-investigate something, right? They're just going to go in guns a-blazing. Because that's how you're going to find out information real fast. Is to garner attention from the police and the FBI right away. Do you see what I'm saying, folks? If you're going to do that, you go incognito. Why? You go and befriend them. Why? You try to get information from them, perhaps by trying to acquire a child or some sort of something to get evidence. But no, like Project Veritas, what a great example of somebody that wants to self-investigate. You know? That guy goes in like, he gets plastic surgery done. He wears the fake mustaches. I mean, that guy is just unbelievable. James, I can't remember his last name. But you understand what I'm saying. This whole story stinks, and you can see it for what it is. It's an entire propaganda narrative that they're putting out there to vilify independent media because they're crying, because their mainstream media mouthpiece has lost their credibility and nobody watches them anymore. Look at the ratings. You know, the strongest cable news, I think, is like O'Reilly, right? And he's garnering 3 million people. 3 million on primetime television. You know why? Because nobody watches it anymore. Everybody does what? They stream it. You know who watches that stuff? Old people that don't give a crap because they're going to die soon. That's who watches it. They don't want to know technology. There's crazy computers, why? I don't want to deal with that crap. Of course you don't want to deal with that crap. So that's why your average age of somebody that watches O'Reilly's probably like 87. It's crazy. Look it. Don't buy into the fake narrative. That's what's fake. That's what's fake. And if anybody brings this up or challenges you on it, kindly ask them to define what fake news is. Because as soon as you force them to do it, they lose. Because there is none. All they're doing is pushing a narrative, an ad hominem attack. Oh, it's crazy. I didn't want to talk about this tonight. Look at this. Oh, it's horrible. In other news, the Daily Sheeple. One of my favorite writers, Charles Hugh Smith, wrote about populism in America, follow the money. This is great. Absolutely wonderful. It says if you want to understand today's populism, don't look to the mainstream media's comically buffoonish propaganda blaming the Russians. Look at these 4 issues. He says one of the most disturbing failures of the mainstream media in the election cycle was its complete lack of historical context for Trump's brand of populism. If you consume the mainstream media's coverage of the campaign and election, you noted their obsession with speech acts as opposed to concrete actions, personalities and conspiracy theories pinning American populism on Russian propaganda. Comrade. The mainstream media dismisses populism by pushing 2 absurdly ignorant narratives. 1, populism, we're told, always leads to authoritarian rule and or fascism, i.e. Nazism. All populist movements are therefore tarred with the Nazism brush. No good could possibly come from populist movements because, why, they always lead to fascism. This, of course, is convenient for the apologists of the embattled status quo, but it's utterly false. America's enormous populist movement and movements in the past has never led to fascism. At least not yet. Who knows? Number 2, since the status quo is wonderful and America's economy is strong like ox, dissent or populism cannot be homegrown. It must be the work of the devil in the guise of foreign propaganda. Notice a classic propaganda ploy being deployed here. Since dissent is impossible in a regime as well managed and prosperous as America's status quo, populism must be driven and controlled by evil foreign agents. Of course, it's laughably absurd. America's populist movements, including the present one, have been revolts against the concentrated wealth and power of self-serving status quo elites. If the mainstream media actually employed well-informed analysts rather than empty-headed politically correct parrots, you might have learned that America has a long and rich history of populism that did not lead to authoritarianism or fascism. Very interesting. It says there have been several major populist movements against the ruling elites. Andrew Jackson's election in 1828 stemmed from such a revolt, and the Populist Party, a.k.a. the People's Party, and Socialist Party movements of the late 1800s and early 1900s were progressive left-wing reactions to the enormous concentration of wealth and power in the elites of the day. In the early 1900s, in the late 1800s, they called it the money trust. And there was a huge pushback by people like us, the peasants, because of the concentrated wealth and power. Both movements attacked the money and credit mechanisms of the elite. In Jackson's case, the target was the Second Bank of the United States. In the Populist Party era, the issue was free silver, i.e. the expansion of the money supply via issuing silver coinage, because back then we were on the gold standard. Now, there are two dynamics at work beneath the surface of populist movements. Charles writes, one is a transformation in the dominant mode of production, i.e. the organization and ownership of the productive assets that power economic growth. And the second is the political realignment that results from a transformation in the mode of production. In the late 19th century, agrarian interests that were losing power to industry and banking typically found expression in populist movements. Such movements included an elite faction that saw its power and wealth being threatened by new elites. For example, England's landed gentry resisted the political and economic power of industrialists who sought an expansion of the engines of their wealth, global trade, and a poorly paid mobile urban workforce. The winds of change can be understood by tracking which wealthy factions are funding the two political parties. Author Thomas Ferguson makes the case that Franklin Roosevelt won the presidency partly as a result of the financial support of large multinational corporations and with global interests. Roosevelt's opponents were typically domestic companies that depended on cheap labor and a stiff tariff to keep out competition. Let's not also forget that there was a coup soon after, an attempted coup on Franklin Roosevelt by your, if you want to call them, right-wing neocons and industrialists, your domestic industrialists, your domestic banking syndicate here, because they felt like they got betrayed. Here's Roosevelt, who comes from a prominent banking family and a prominent banking background, and he just kicked them in the stones. So what did they do? They wanted to install a fascist dictator here in the United States, and it wasn't. The only reason why we didn't get one at that time was because of General Smedley Butler. And if you don't know who General Smedley Butler is, look him up. Because if it wasn't for him, we would have been a fascist dictatorship many, many years ago. By the way, he was the only Marine to win 2 Medals of Honor. Not 1, 2. Most people have to die to get that. Yeah. He wrote a great book called War is a Racket. And if you don't understand what that is, or haven't read it before, check it out. Short book and a very powerful one. So you know what American foreign policy is all about and who drives it. Now, Charles writes, today's populism has drawn funding from individuals and enterprises who have been left out of globalism's massive increase in elitist wealth. Remember, the chasm between the wealthy elite, the top 0.001%, and the rest of America, the rest of the world for that matter, is huge. It has opened up big time. If we look at the issues that cross party lines, i.e. that drew support from both Sanders and Trump supporters, we find 4 key issues. Anti-globalism, discussed with the establishment's self-serving corrupt elites, i.e. anti-elitism, economic nationalism, and anti-endless neocon wars, drone strikes, and foreign entanglements. Pretty good. Issues 1, 3, and 4 were encapsulated in Democrat George McGovern's 1972 campaign slogan, Come home, America. A message disdained by today's Democratic Party elites who have skimmed hundreds of millions of dollars in campaign contributions from global finance and corporate interests because they don't care about you anymore. It's crazy. Is it coincidence that corporate profits skyrocketed from about 2001, right when labor's share of GDP fell off a cliff? Right when all the banking laws were basically thrown out. I mean, this is what happened. But you know what they do? They blame the Russians. Yeah, it was the Russians that did it. Hey, it wasn't us. We didn't do it. It's those pesky Russians. This is what I'm saying, folks. This is how absurd it is. And I hope and pray that all of you out there don't buy it. I really do. There may be one or two of you that do, but I have hope, by God, that the majority of you don't buy it. And if you know anybody that does, by all means, please educate your friends, your family, your coworkers. Let them understand how stupid this really is, because it's stupid. It's crazy. And things are going to start coming down all around us if we don't have major change happen. If Trump doesn't change the status quo, and don't expect him to make waves. I mean, he'll do things here and there. Remember, it's all about perception. It's not about actual change. It's how people perceive it. I can only hope and pray that we see some good change come to America. However, the track record isn't so good. It's not so good. But hey, who knows? You know, we could have a miracle happen. We could have a miracle happen. But I can tell you, the people that Trump is surrounding himself with aren't typically the people that you would expect big changes to come from. So I say keep your expectations realistic and keep accountability flowing. We need accountability. They don't want it. They don't like it. We applied it. It affected the election of the United States. And it can affect a whole lot more if we continue to keep up the pressure. And that's why they push the fake news narrative, my friends. And that's why we cannot buy into it. And we have to fight it. And we have to show it for what it is. Shine a mirror in front of it and let it see its reflection. And I guarantee you, it'll run away screaming and crying. I'm Joe Joseph. This was the DailySheeple.com's Daily News Brief. I will have one again for you tomorrow. Have a great night, everybody. God bless.